I'll call the meeting to order. Is that right, as chairman? And then resign? Is that the procedure? I have some conflicts that I didn't expect, and will take some time, more time than I think would be appropriate to be chairman and do the requisite responsibilities. So I want to remain on the commission, but I don't think it's appropriate for me to try to serve two masters at once. The other master is not related to the city at all, but I've got a project I need to take care of. I mean, a business project I need to take care of that I was committed to that I didn't realize was going to be so lengthy and difficult. So as a result, I would like to stay on, but I'm resigning as commission, as the chairman. And notified the city to that effect.
Thanks, Mike.
Okay, with that being said, we'll do the roll call. Andy Hare,
I'm here.
Benjamin Mednick,
Present.
Eileen Leahy,
Here.
Jeffrey Duran. He's not here. Lawrence L. Harris Jr., Minor Carter,
Here, present.
Paul W. Rankin,
Here.
Robert Tufts,
Here.
and Ron Schneider.
Here.
Okay.
Thank you.
And so the next thing on your agenda is you'll be doing the reappointments for the positions. So you take it away.
Okay.
Andy?
I guess as vice chair, I will step in here. As you just heard, the commission has had a request from the chair that he prefers to remain a member, but not serve as chair. Well, I'd be happy to serve as chair. And I've had discussions with Paul and Eileen. Paul could move from secretary to vice chair, and Eileen from into the secretarial role. What I'd like to do now is call for any further nominations from the floor. Are there any other nominations? Hearing none, I will call for a motion.
I'll move that to obviously accept Commissioner Carter's resignation, and secondly to elect Mr. Hare as chair, Ms. Leahy as vice chair, and myself, Paul Rankin, myself, Paul Rankin as vice chair, and Ms. Leahy as secretary.
I'll second. Appropriate.
I'll vote yes.
Yes. Yes. It's essentially two motions.
It is. Should I
So
split them?
probably should split them just to be on the,
All right.
Other side.
So those motions then are going to be officially split. First motion will be to accept the resignation of Commissioner Carter as chair, and for him to remain on the commission.
I'll second.
okay.
All in favor, Andy?
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Opposed? Hearing none?
I'll make a second
Approved.
motion to nominate Andy Hare for chair, Paul Rankin for vice chair, and Eileen Leahy for secretary position on the commission.
I'll second. Minor Carter will second.
Approved? Do I hear all approved?
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Hearing none? It's been approved.
Thanks.
We need the approval of the minutes that Tika forwarded for the meeting on March 9th. Are there any changes, edits?
Tika, did you say that there was someone not included?
I think Tika corrected it.
Okay.
Yes, I corrected. It's Takia, by the way, guys.
I apologize.
It's okay. But yes, I corrected it.
It was Rob. Rob
Ron.
was
Mhm.
initially, and I remember Rob was on the meeting on the 9th.
Great, okay. I'll make a motion to adopt the minutes without change then.
Okay.
I'll second. Minor Cardinal second.
All approved, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Hearing none, minutes are approved. Although this is the second meeting, allow me to at least share some initial thoughts about, this is strictly about process, but what I'd like to do is at least get the process rolling fast enough, because we are on a relatively tight schedule. I personally like to use each meeting to essentially recalibrate what we've done. But at the same time, I'd like to have the meeting serve as an opportunity to report what we found out, share and express views, and also make decisions. But at the same time, I'd like the secretary to at least keep track of the open items in the meeting, and they will raise them at the next meeting. It's just a way of making sure we don't let anything slip between the cracks that somebody has raised or somebody wants to talk about, and then we essentially don't take advantage of it. So I would at least like that mechanism put in place. You have my promise to engage every member of this commission to the extent you've got the time, and in my business we tend to call it the bandwidth to be involved is terrific. And when I say that, I mean spreading the work, tap your expertise, your diversity, your interests, your desires. But unfortunately, the downside is we also need volunteers. So there's going to be certain things we need to do that we're going to have to roll the sleeves up and actually get things researched, to get things discussed, and get things done. I've had the opportunity to serve on multilateral global commissions, and I get so frustrated, and I don't know whether you share the same view, is they turn into essentially just gab fests. And I don't think we'd all feel that good if we came to the 6-month mark on this and we've done nothing more than just talk. I think really what we have is an exceptional opportunity to actually make a difference. And so I'd like to at least, as I say, recruit every single one. You're gonna find, I spread the workload very wide, very dear. If we divide up the work, so to speak, we'll need a mechanism to keep the rest of the commission informed. So I'd like suggestions of the commission right now. How would be the best way? What are our collective thoughts, or individual thoughts actually, to start with, and then ultimately the collective thoughts? How do we keep ourselves informed? Rob?
I've been putting some thought towards this, Andy, and one of the things that I come up with, I mean, which is just kind of obvious, I don't know how the rest of the group would feel about this, would be to maybe to split us off into, if we can do maybe small committees based around essentially what you had just mentioned. We each are going to have probably different areas of expertise, different areas of knowledge, different interests in terms of what we'd like to see happen, come out of this commission. And so maybe we can sort of divvy up the charter that way. And, there's different sections of the charter, or maybe a committee, we could set it up so a committee takes a look at each section and then we report back, at each of these meetings regarding the work that we've done on that section.
Okay, good. Paul, did you have your hand up?
I did. I was just thinking, actually past Rob's point, that we use on one of the civic associations I'm on, just a Google Drive. Now, I don't know how legal that is in this setup for the city, but that's a way to keep everybody informed, because you just post documents and other things to the Google Drive. I guess we'd have to ask Jackie or somebody if that's a doable thing, assuming that you would want to go that way. But that was just my idea, so that any documents that we gathered, we'd have in a place.
Did I see another hand?
I would like just to
Ken.
speak to that. We did talk last time about subcommittees and the need to sort of followed the rule of law, if you will, as they gathered information and wrote their reports. But I think we decided that since the subcommittee is referring to the commission as a whole, that we would sort of have the leeway and the freedom to gather resources, notes, documents, et cetera, as long as we presented it. I am interested in getting that legal feedback to your point about a Google Drive and even an email list, but I wonder if it could fall within that that understanding that ultimately what really registers and matters is what the commission as a whole discusses and votes on.
I'm just wondering if another way also, if we can't do a Google Drive, is just really to expect, at least 2 days before our meetings, that each subcommittee could, submit a summary for review ahead of time. So that we're not kind of getting a lot of documents at the last minute, and maybe just some summaries that can be, expounded on. Sometimes when you have a Google Drive or a Dropbox and you just start dropping stuff in, I've found that sometimes it turns into a lot of paper. And you have to read through it all to really kind of pull it together. And I kind of think if each subgroup takes on the responsibility of summarizing it for the rest of us, that's sometimes helpful.
Other comments?
May I say something?
Mhm.
This is Jacqueline Lee. I'd like to echo Eileen's comments as far as circulating the drafts ahead of the meetings, and it's just it's an easier way of keeping on top of the paperwork that's passing among the commission. And I also wanted to just bring to your attention that we are going to be introducing a resolution on the 12th of April to extend the commission's term date for an additional 2 months. So you will have until July 12th to get the recommendations in because we were late in getting everything moving.
Great.
Okay.
I'm sorry, what is the new date? You said it's a 2-month extension, but
Yes,
to what
July
date?
12th.
Right.
July
And
12th.
Jackie, can you confirm, my understanding from the charter is that that's when we have to submit a draft, not necessarily the final, because I believe in 2011, they didn't get their final in until
November.
November.
Yes, I'm not sure what happened back then. It does say in the charter that we're required to submit drafts of the charter provisions that we intend to recommend amendments to. But I think that, if we need more time to submit a final report, then we can request that at the time we submit on July 12th.
Okay.
Can we get an answer? I'm actually looking at the charter right now. And the actual language says revision of the charter and the city code shall be submitted no later than 6 months after its appointment.
Right. That's why we requested the extra 2 months, because we were appointed and then we didn't set up the commission and start having meetings until almost 8 weeks after the appointment of the commission. So that's why it's been extended.
But wouldn't the shot clock start when the appointment was made?
Yes. Yes. So
Right.
that was January
That was
11th.
January.
Yeah, well, then 6 months after would be, okay.
It's really not giving us 6 months from January is July, Jackie. So it's not really giving us an extended 2 months.
Right.
Are you saying you're going to give us till September?
No, that was the.
That was my question.
Okay, let me look that in. I've got 2 pieces of legislation here. So we've got extension. We're looking at.
While we're waiting on that, just going back to the idea of how we communicate in between meetings, we had given the city all of our email addresses, but I know we had also talked about having a group address or forum, which obviously we keep everybody connected. Has there been any thought or discussion as to a group address for communicating?
You mean an email through the city?
Or something? I mean, we could obviously make our own groups with our own service, but I didn't know if there was anything official.
Well, I think one of the things we talked about in the prior meeting, and it was mentioned in this meeting, was can we lawfully do that? Can we do that and
Right.
still stay within the confines of being a public commission?
Right.
I think once we have that answer, the mechanism, if we can get that answer sooner, maybe even now, that would be great. And I think then there's the second thing, which is how do we share? I do share Eileen's point about, a Dropbox or a Google Drive tends to be nothing more than a large garbage can. But if it's done properly, I mean, if it's parsed properly, it could be a good resource. It could be the equivalent of a library, a digital library that could be used. So as people find interesting things or valuable things that they really want to share, as opposed to spinning it around in an email attachment, you just drop it in and just let everyone know. Interesting article, interesting point of view, or an interesting something that if we've got interest, we can actually look at it. But I do think, to Ben's point, we do need to get that resolved. Can we do either one of those?
Well, you're sort
I'd be
of,
happy.
I'm sorry.
Go ahead. I was going to say, I'd be happy to follow up on that. I mean, I'm sorry, Ben. Go ahead.
With any type of Dropbox technology, Google Drive or whatever, we're going to end up in this position no matter what. If a document is housed in Google Drive, for instance, and we wish to share it with all members, there are email addresses attached to that collaborative group.
Mm-hmm.
So the moment we link out a document, a resource, or a summary, we are effectively emailing this group. So I think we need to have the answer to how do we communicate with each other on a public commission in a legal forum.
Okay.
Or does it not matter because the only thing that matters is what happens under a quorum,
I think when I checked, I followed up on that question, and Takia, I think you and I discussed it. And as long as there's not a quorum meeting, that's fine. Now, the sharing of information should be something that I think could be done. I mean, I'm willing to touch base with, work with Takia and follow up from the city standpoint. I know that from the elections board, we have not set something like that up because the question always was, who's going to be responsible for monitoring it, answering it, things like that. Now that had to do with more of a public input. And so that's a whole other thing as far as do we want to set something up for the citizens of Annapolis to be sending us information and sending us questions and things like that. So I think there's a couple of different parts of that communication piece. There's the Dropbox or a Google Drive, there's the emails, and then there's also the communication with the public, which I think at our last meeting, Rob talked about a little bit. So I can certainly touch base in terms of the city and, either with Jacqueline or other people in the Office of Law and also with Takia to try to get an answer on that before we meet again.
Okay, that would be helpful. And
I
let's
think-
not lose sight.
Go ahead,
of the
Andy.
fact- Yeah, I'm sorry. Let's not lose sight of the fact of Eileen's good suggestion of the 2 days before. It would just be very, very helpful if we all had an opportunity to read or at least view this material, so we come into these sessions with a little bit more expertise and knowledge, and we're a little bit more aware than just getting on the same day. I'd even be willing to go if you can do maybe even 3 days before, just to allow us to, wade through this.
And Eileen, as you're having these discussions with legal and with the city, just I think it's worth reminding everyone that we're still under pandemic conditions, and this commission, even though it's a public one, is working under additional, I'd say, burdens, if you will. And so the ability to have shared drives and email lists and communicate with each other in that way can only help the process.
Right.
I
No, I agree.
turn around, so.
Agree. Takia, you had?
Hi, I just spoke with Hillary Raftovich, who is the boards and commissions person, and I was asking her about the email account. And she said that they don't set up email accounts through the city for boards and commissions because of the expense. What they can do is set up an alias account, but that would go to an employee's, which I guess would be me. Or you guys could set up a Gmail account because that's free to a person, but they ask that the password be given to the city.
Password be given to who?
To the city. And I'm not sure if it's Hillary, me, which person, but, and then also when the commission disperses, it would need to delete the account.
Okay, my focus, and maybe I was not on the right page on this one, but my focus was how do we communicate on relevant subject matter among us? And the communication could be something like an email, or it could be a document, or it could be whatever. Is there anything that prevents us from doing that as a commission? Now, obviously we can write individuals emails, but I was more concerned about, is there a bright line that we're crossing that we shouldn't be?
I don't think so. I
I'll
mean,
double check, but I don't think so. And in fact, I think I may have asked Ashley Leonard that question.
Okay, well,
And
I-
I
sorry.
think we should be okay as long as we're communicating with each other and not technically meeting. I mean, we
I-
share information, and I know other boards share information among members. You just make sure everybody's on that email.
right.
there's certainly been not a problem on legislation. At least in the General Assembly, committees do that and subcommittees do that all the time. I would assume since the state does it, I would think that the city could do that. I mean, certainly those committees have a lot of emails that go back and forth. Group emails, just keeping people up to date, minutes and all that sort of thing.
Right, but I can double check with the City of Law and send out,
Okay.
maybe talk with,
That's good. Now,
just touch base and send out some guidelines of what we can and cannot do.
in the same vein, Eileen, could we also determine whether it's okay to have the Google Drive or the Dropbox? And everybody.
Yeah, I'll
and I
check
think
with
Janice
both Hillary
mentioned it,
and I'll touch base with Takia and Jacqueline.
and we'll just organize it. So as I said, it doesn't turn into a garbage can that is just impossible to sort through.
Right. Okay,
Okay, but I'm keeping my eye on the clock. I've got my clocks over here. And we have to cover quite a bit. We finished actually our first topic, but I'd like to get to item 5 in the agenda, which is to discuss the scope of the commission's work product. In light of the fact that we want to spread the work, in preparation for this meeting, I put together a series of quote unquote volunteers that I think we'll need. Now, I need your guidance right now, immediately, in terms of, should we go through the discussion, let's say over the next 10 to 15 minutes, and then come back to individual volunteers? You're going to have to keep notes on this. I've got notes that I can follow, or should we just take each topic at a time, and whoever wants to volunteer raise their hand, and then that becomes essentially the committee head or what have you? I'm willing to go either way, whichever way the commission feels comfortable. One is to, we'll have the discussion, come back, who can do ding, 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 ding. And then I think hopefully get a fair distribution. Or we'll talk about a topic and we'll look for a volunteer. Talk about the next topic, look for a volunteer. Which way?
You're the chairman.
I think we ought to go and see.
We
I
should
mean,
follow your agenda. And
Okay.
if there are missing items, we can add them after. So.
Okay. Okay. The way my agenda was laid out was to get a volunteer after every discussion. Okay. So,
Hello,
please.
if we have some idea of what the task would be, some of us may feel comfortable doing one versus another. And some of us may have the correct talent for various tasks. So if we have some idea up front what they might be, then we can start the volunteer process.
Very good point. Why don't I just, if just want to take a pencil out, we're going to talk about, number one, we're going to talk about trying to figure out what the scope of the commission is. And I'm going to call that the issues. This is not defining this is just saying, let's talk about, we want to talk about this particular thing. Eileen last meeting brought up the issue of elections. That could be one of the issues. But I think what we need to do is have a bit of a laundry list on this is as broad as we're going to get. We're going to talk about whatever. There might be 4, 5, 6 issues. Last commission only looked at 3. At least it looked like they only looked at 3. Okay, so number 1 is issues. Number 2 might be what I'll call research, meaning especially, and I know this may overlap a bit, but it would be in the area of if we're going to look at governance of the city, should we start looking at how other cities are doing it? That's the research I'm talking about, where you start digging in a little bit deeper in terms of what are best practices elsewhere. Doesn't make any difference whether it's another city within the state of Maryland, another city within the United States, or another city somewhere in the world. But it's just to come up with a bit of but it's more research driven. The third one I have is I think we really have to come up with a list of people we need to interview and talk. And I want to go back to a point Ben made about 3 or 4 minutes ago, which is very, very valuable. We are under kind of a COVID umbrella right now. And I think had we not been, we could have a very general meeting, bring somebody in and have a discussion. Now, things are going to be different now in terms of how do we start talking to people? How do we figure out who we want to talk to? What are the questions we want to collectively ask? So that could be number 3. Number 4 is how do we communicate what we're doing outside? Last meeting, we talked a little bit about the role that the website plays. It would be terrific if somebody had maybe a background or an interest in that to shape that in such a way. But I think that also comes with the responsibility, and this is more of a recommendation on my side, that person becomes the funnel, if you allow me to use that word, the funnel from the commission to the website, the commission to the city to the website. So in other words, there's somebody, we're not going to burden the city staff with updates. It's going to be somebody on the commission who is going to be making those decisions. This ought to go on. And then he talks or she talks to the city to actually get the website. So that's about it. So now allow me, if you will, Lawrence, did I kind of address the breadth of what at least my thoughts were in terms of things we need to do, or things we need to at least roll our sleeves up and get involved in? So
Yes.
If you'll allow me, let's go to number 1, which is more of an issues area. We're going to look for volunteers. What's the boundaries of this project? We only have, subject to getting some bad news from when our deadline is. I was assuming we had until the end of September. And I say, okay, that's 22 weeks from now. I counted on the calendar, and that's not a whole lot of time. Now, if it's not 22 weeks, let's say it's 15, that's practically, in my view, it's practically no time. That's a very, very accelerated schedule. So I think we have to be very careful now in creating that list of what are we going to look at? What are we going to be involved in? So if I could maybe get suggestions from the floor, and then I'll be silent. Last year, I know you have it. Eileen, I'll get to you just 1 second. Last year, 2011 looked at elections, finances, and legislation. So that gives you roughly the level with which the analysis was done. So with that, issues. Eileen.
Well, I think in the last commission on those topics are what they talked about in terms of needing from some changes. My understanding is we're supposed to look at the entire charter. So my recommendation would be, when we're talking about subcommittees, is just literally go by different article and either combine the articles or just look at the articles. And I think it's also very important, especially on the ones that were mentioned in their report. What is the status? What is the current status of those sorts of things, and why? So for instance, with elections, why weren't those things implemented? I think that's a very important part of moving forward with it. But I would just think in terms of just initially I mean, I'm looking at it now, there's 10 articles.
Mm-hmm.
And they cover everything from general provisions to the elections, to powers, to council, all of those. And maybe just either as simple as divvying it up or combining a couple that seem to go together, but that might be one place, at least just look at that particular part of the code. And I like what you're saying in terms of looking at other municipalities.
Okay.
But the structure that structure is already there. So I tend to kind of go with maybe what we can start with.
I absolutely agree with Eileen's approach on that, and taking a look at the charter. It seems like some of these are pretty straightforward that I think we could all take a look right now and be like, oh, this is fine. We don't even need to, dig into this at all, right? Because some of them are so straightforward. But so yeah, I absolutely agree with Eileen's approach on this.
There is a Maryland Municipal League that provides, I can contact them. I didn't want to do that and let everybody talk about what guidelines they have. I mean, that's what the Maryland Municipal League is. It's the trade association. I don't know if trade association is the right word for municipalities in the state. And I don't know what they have, but I'd be happy to contact them and say, what do they have? What information do they have about these city governance and municipality governance? Are there any questions? Are they a resource for us? I would think so if we had any questions.
Well, they actually were quoted, I would say significantly in the final report in 2011.
Yes.
So not only would that be a good source to at least start with, but I also think we ought to be able to set up an interview with somebody there.
I can do that. I can call them tomorrow if you want.
So the suggestions. Okay, I wanted to. Was trying to keep separate issues versus discussions that we're going to have. Issues is more what the commission wants to focus on, whereas discussions might influence some of those issues. In other words, it's more learnings that we're going to have later on. So, but minor, let's hold that point, but let's come back to it in hopefully just a minute or two. How about let's say ask for volunteers, the broad thing. But Eileen, before we get to that, I'm going back to the enabling legislation in the charter, because it says not only the charter, but it says the city code. I know we talked about that on the 9th, because that opens it up significantly. Are we going to make a decision in this meeting that we will limit it to the charter and not review the city code? I'm only looking at the legislation now.
Right. I would defer to Jackie, but I think it's just the charter.
Jackie.
Yes, so the scope of work that we're looking at is the charter. But because the charter is the enabling legislation for the city code, there may be aspects of the city code that are implicated by any changes we suggest in the charter. But our focus should be on the charter itself.
Okay.
Because once you make that change, for instance, I'm sorry to keep going back to elections, but if the commission says we should or shouldn't go towards partisan or nonpartisan elections, then kind of you have to hand that off to the appropriate commission and say, this is what the recommendation is. We'd like a report on how you're either going to implement it or not. And I think that's the piece that hasn't happened in the past. Or how do you go about changing that? But that's not something that we can get done, because so much of any changes that are recommended in charter are going to really bring about a lot of different code changes. And then just going back real quick to Minor's point, I think, we can invite speakers to our meetings. I mean, we can't necessarily quorum, but I think that would be helpful. And I'd like for this to be a more creative process. I mean, one of my personal feelings about the city is that we're not creative enough. And let's find out what are the trends for the future. What's not just being talked about at the municipalities, but what's being talked about at the state level, because what happens at the state eventually trickles down to us. So that's just my little extra push.
This is Ron, and I just a quick comment. I apologize for not being in the first meeting. I just recently found out I was on the commission, but I like the idea of walking through the articles and dividing it up that way. But I do also think it's important that if there are 3 or 4 issues that we feel strongly about that would influence how our thoughts on how we would like to modify some of those articles, I think that would be important as well.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I was going to work hard to try to not get the cart on the wrong side of the horse, because I was hoping maybe by the next meeting, whomever, I think it's going to be plural, but whomever takes the lead on this would come back with whatever discussions, analysis, whatever thoughts they had, and then say, here are the 4, here are the 6 that we ought to be looking at. And we don't, I guess somebody made that point that, these few, we just don't need to bother with, because.
Well, I think we have to look at all of them, and then
we've looked at them all.
This one seemed okay, because I find that was what was lacking in the last commission report, was they didn't tell us anything about the other areas. They, even if you think it's okay, that's pertinent information to know why they thought it was okay.
I completely agree. I think, but I was hoping that the job of this particular subcommittee would be that they make the recommendation back to, at our next meeting, back to us, and they say, these are the 4 that we ought, these are 5. Yeah, and they're the reasons why we ought not to look at that. We'll record why we're not going to look at it, but at least we're not spending a significant amount of time in areas that is going to produce no fruit. We're not actually going to get anything out of it. I was just trying to.
Right. I guess to go back to your point though, Andy, I think, full disclosure, I'm a retired nurse and nurse practitioner. So first thing you do is assess and you use your research. So I think by the next meeting, just because we look at it and don't think anything needs to be done, I think we have to support it with some research. And I think, again, just subdividing and then, to Ron's point, coming back in terms of how we want to modify it. But I don't want to speed through this. I don't think we need to be feeling like we've got to speed through this. I think Jackie has already given us the feedback that if we need more time, it's potentially there. But I'm not comfortable by the next meeting of saying, everything looks okay in this area, because I don't think I would have had enough time to really research it. And again, I'm happy to pick 1 or 2 of the articles and work with somebody else on coming up with that. But I think also any of our recommendations need to really have some strong background on why we're making that decision.
I would like to call, if everybody agrees, the Maryland Municipal League, and if they have any papers or suggestions on what works and what hasn't worked in municipalities. That's sort of their trade association job. What are the models that they found, that have worked and what hasn't worked? And if they can give us a quick summary of that, I've authorized, I will call them tomorrow. I know them and say, can you give us some advice on what's worked and what hasn't worked? I mean, they should know that. They should have something like that with their research. If that's okay, that may give us a footprint on what's happened in the past.
I think it would be useful, very useful to know that, to at least get that from them. But I also think at the same time, we ought to be thinking about getting them to join a meeting that we have at some point.
I would ask them to make a presentation. I don't have any problem asking them to come in and to do that. I mean, to say, here's what other cities have done and hadn't worked and has worked and under these circumstances. I can do that tomorrow.
Okay.
Andy, I feel like we should do something like that, which is to bring in a municipal league representative sooner rather. I mean, to me, that's probably step number one. I appreciate the idea of dividing and conquering all this, but I share Eileen's general view that, you've only got 10 basic sections here, which some are larger than others, but some are just verbose. I mean, I don't think it'd be that hard for this group to kind of swiftly move through the 10 sections. And if we all say during that swift movement through that, we're not going to rewrite Article 2 because it's fine. That's going to winnow down our field of play and allow us to divide up into, I think, more effective committees and subcommittees.
The Municipal League has a conference every year, and they have a virtual, the one in 2020 was virtual. So that may actually be on their website and maybe a great resource in terms of looking at what was discussed. They are having their next one, which is going to be an in-person in June 27th to 29th, which I think would be worthwhile for us to think about, at least some of us attending. It's in Ocean City, so my house and Paul's house are open. No,
the virtual
it
is in July.
It is a great resource, but I think there's also quite a bit that's on their website that we can go ahead and access. And then go to the other municipalities. I know that Bowie and Rockville have some really good information, and just go to their websites and just cull from that, but also step outside of Maryland. We're so homogeneous that it would be great to look at what else is going on in some of the other municipalities and other, what else is our size? I know that Historic Annapolis has been looking at Charleston in terms of how that interacts with Annapolis being a tourist town. So there's others that we might want to look at. What are the sizes that have kind of similar challenges in terms of population and other things? So
that would fall into the group that does the research. And granted, everybody can have cross pollination on, and they get, the ones looking at the issues of the charter can actually do research if they want. What I was trying to achieve is to get a smaller group of people that knew what was expected of them and just plow through some of this stuff. And then it doesn't make any difference whether it's next meeting or but I think at some point in time, we really do need to have a fairly good understanding of what we're digging into. Otherwise, we're going to spend an awful lot of time, waste a lot of time, and find ourselves really without a good work product at the end. So do I have maybe a volunteer to lead on the issues area? And this might be a fairly good sized group, given the fact that we're going to look at all 10. And then hopefully we could have an agenda item in the next meeting to report back, what their views are. This isn't solutions. This isn't what you're going to do. It's this particular area is ripe for change. This particular section really does need a much greater or deeper look. So it's not trying to solve the problem as much as it's saying this is what we're going to address. So possible lead to.
I guess I'm not quite following the path yet.
right.
Is the
Okay.
proposal that the lead here would sort of query the commission and then report back with, some type of, these were the top items that came up as it relates to the ideas that we should pursue?
No, Ben, what I was referring to is that is there, the lead could be plural. I mean, there could be 2 or 3 people involved in this, or more than that, where they 2 or 3 are actually parsing, reading, understanding what is the either the low hanging or the medium hanging fruit that we ought to tackle in terms of looking at the charter. So what I was looking for is essentially a set of volunteers that could at least take this particular part of it. And then next meeting, we'll just have essentially a discussion of what's been discovered, what's been found, what are the views, but it should be a discussion. So what I'm really trying to find is that group, if you will, that will take this on. I mean, everybody can do it if they want, but I think it's going to spread the resource so thin that we might not be able to get to some of the other things we need to or would want to get to. Rob, you had your hand up.
I was just simply, you said you were looking for people to be part of that group. I would like to be part of that group. I don't know if I'm in a position right now. I don't know if the bandwidth to lead that group, but I would definitely want to be a part of that group that takes a look at each of
Okay.
from what I'm understanding, it sounds like what you're wanting to do is that you're kind of wanting to do almost kind of like a triage kind of thing, where you're just wanting us to take a quick look and determine which ones, just a quick look at everything. So then we can focus on specific ones. And I would be happy to be a part of that group.
Okay, good.
And I'll be glad to be part of that group as well. This is Ron.
Good. Ron.
I'll be happy to talk to John Hammond. I mean, I'll be happy to be part of the group, but John Hammond's one of my closest friends, and in my view, one of the great aldermen. I'm not sure everybody agrees with that, but I strongly believe that.
Okay.
And I'll talk to him at length to see what recommendations he has.
Okay, good.
Andy,
Yes.
could I make the recommendation, and I'm willing to at least, pull this together, but I think as a group, we all should be looking at this. I think it behooves every single member. There's only 9 of us, maybe 8, but I think the real issue, I mean, for us to come up with a list of issues, I think we all should take it upon ourselves to read the code, make the comments, make the questions, and I, as secretary, am happy to consolidate them. But I don't think we need to be, parsing this out in that way in terms of the issues. I think we all need to look at it, and then we could take all of that, and then as a group, just this group, say, okay, we've looked at all of this. These 3 things seem to rise to the top. And then say, okay, then we're going to look at those a little bit more closely. But I can't imagine any of us not really taking the time to really look at that charter and just do exactly what you're asking us to do. I don't think we need a subcommittee. We all should be doing it.
I also think that everybody ought to talk to their alderman or former alderman and say, I mean, one of the things I've seen in my time here is there's one common thread that I've seen run through aldermen or alderwomen is complete frustration with the program. And I think that if you know any of those, I think you ought to ask them about if they were in charge, what would they change? Because I do think that a lot of aldermen that have left that have been very good and left out of frustration. More than anything, I can tell you, Dick Israel and I managed his campaigns and all. That was his biggest frustration, was that the process was not easy to work.
Paul, you had your hand up.
Yeah, I'm just maybe make a suggestion along perhaps Eileen's route, and with apologies to you, Andy, but I wonder if maybe the route is that everybody does what theoretically I thought we were going to do, which was just if you haven't already, you go through the thing with a fine-tooth comb, or as close to that as you possibly can. Write down your 3, 5, 10, 30 suggestions with a reason, not just, for fun.
Mhm.
And present them, have Eileen consolidate them, and then as a group, we walk back through all 60 changes. And then you can start splitting stuff up because they'll naturally fall into categories and spaces like elections, like finance, like administration. But I think, to try and split us up now, it's too early. That's just my view, and
Okay.
with respect.
Fair enough. Fair enough. Okay, that's fine. But I want to get back to what Minor just said. What I was trying to accomplish was not spread the group too thin. And what Minor's recommending is really the second point is discussions that we need to have with people. On one hand, we've got an analysis going on what our views are after reading a code or a structure or a document. And on another hand is seeking the views of those that have to live inside it in some fashion. And I see both parts of those valuable. But at the same time, I think we really ought to be spending some time figuring out who we need to talk to, making those arrangements, whether they join a commission meeting or whether those of us that know certain people go out and just chat with them, and somehow the essentially the core of the conversation gets put back in front of the entire group. So we really understand some of the concerns that these people have. So getting back to my original point is I was trying to avoid spreading the group too thin. But yes, I agree with you. But I would go along with Paul's idea. Let's all take a crack at this, and we will send our comments back to Eileen, and then hopefully she can sort them out. And then next meeting we'll have a discussion on how we in fact want to attack this particular project. Can we live with that?
Yeah, I'll send out an email so that you can send stuff back to me.
Okay. Ben, you had your hand up.
No, I wanted to second Eileen's vision here. In fact, I wanted to sort of double down on it. I think every member of the commission should read the charter from front to back. And so that this first slice that we're all talking about, I think, is incredibly important. We're not going to get the diversity of view without that initial broad input. So I think this is the absolute right way to do it.
Okay, good.
I have to go. I have a class, so
Okay.
I'm sorry to bug out.
Understand. Yes.
I will follow up with Taki in terms of the minutes and get something out to you all in terms of getting some follow-up. And I'll also follow up in terms of the Gmail and the Dropbox and any other things that I've scribbled down. Okay. So I'll also touch base with Takia as far as next meetings too, so we can set something up that might be on a more ongoing basis.
Okay. That is also on my agenda, trying to figure out what the cycle of these meetings should be.
So
I'm going to defer the issue, but I want to come back to Minor's point. I'm going to defer the issue on trying to get a volunteer who would be interested in doing the research in terms of figuring out best practices, either within state or within the United States, or quite frankly, around the world. And that could be quite fascinating. I think if somebody is interested in that kind of research, happy to take a volunteer now, or we can defer that to a subsequent.
I'll be happy to call the Maryland Municipal League tomorrow.
Okay.
I mean, that's what they do, and say,
That's the
we're
third
interested in
thing.
this.
That's
What-
the third thing. Yeah, that would be the third thing. That what I'm talking about is not just Maryland. I'm talking about somebody that's going to look at a very, very wide swatch. If we are looking at how cities are run and how they're
Well,
governed.
but the Maryland Municipal League, when they testify, when I've been lobbying,
Mhm.
that's what they do. They
Yeah.
say you ought to be, that in any legislation that comes before the Maryland legislature, the Maryland Municipal League comes in and says, they tried this in Kansas City, they did it this way, but Newark did it this way, and this is the better way to try to do it. I mean, that's their
Okay.
job.
Great.
So,
Okay.
I mean, I think that and we may want to go beyond them, but I think as I see it, that's a resource to start us down the road. And if we want more, what happens with the municipal league is say, well, that's good. Who do we contact in Boston, or who do we contact in Ocean City, wherever on this? And
Okay.
they're a free resource, and we ought to, use them.
Hey,
I'm
Andy,
sure we can set that up without too much trouble.
I'd be happy to work with Minor on this.
Okay, great.
Because I think he's exactly right.
Good.
And I know the Maryland Municipal League a little bit, not anywhere near as well as he does. And I'd love to sit at your side. Okay, Minor?
Sure. I mean, I think that
just
we ought to,
include me into your stuff and let me know.
I will. I think that's a resource that and look, the city's been paying them. You got to be a member, and this is what a membership counts for. So we ought to use it.
Right.
Okay, the final thing, actually, I've got some issues, and I'll talk to you about it just in terms of really expanding that role a bit of people we could talk to, people beyond. But the Maryland Municipal League was number one on the list, but there are a whole set of other that I thought might be valuable to also talk about. Given the hour, we're at the hour right now. I will defer talking about the use of the website. I know we talked about it last time. Unless there's somebody on the call who really feels comfortable with this kind of work, I will defer it until next week, and then we can the next meeting, and then we can decide who that might be. The final thing that I did want to talk about was as we mentioned just before Eileen jumped off, was what are people's views, and let's have a discussion on the cycle with which we should have meetings. In other words, that the entire commission gets back together. Obviously, we're going to be working on this between now and the point in time we deliver the end product. But what is a reasonable cycle? What are your views on a reasonable cycle to meet? Yes. Tikia.
So I was working with the TV crew about getting you guys on for regular meetings and updating the calendar. The problem that I have right now is that I have to get the finance committee's budget meeting schedule. So the budget rolls out on April 12th at the city council meeting. And then what happens is finance has a series of additional meetings added to the calendar in addition to their 2 meetings that they have monthly. And so that is where I have the conflict, where I have to wait to see what their schedule is going to be. And then I can fit you guys in. I don't want to set a date and put it on the calendar and then have to cancel it because that finance committee is going to take precedent for me over this commission.
Finance.
Knowing what you know, is it possible that we would be meeting less than once a month? Because I would think that at least twice a month is a minimum.
No, I was working on twice a month. So the days that I had were the first Thursday and the third Tuesday of the month. And we were all ready to go, to put that on the schedule, but then I had to step back because I almost forgot, that those meetings are going to come up. So once I can see when they're going to meet, and hopefully I will know that fairly soon. I'll get with Alderman Arnett to talk about that. Then I can narrow down a day, 2 days for you guys. And I know you guys have to meet in the evening. So I was pinpointing 6 o'clock for you guys as well.
Well,
that
Andy,
workable?
based on the idea of having 2 official meetings a month, to answer your question, it seems to me that we would be given 7 to 10 days after a meeting to pursue our research in subcommittees, our interviews, our documentation, whatever, and then provide the larger commission 5 to 7 days before the next committee to review that work. in summary form. So to me, meeting twice a month would fit that type of schedule. And I think 7 to 10 days to get the work done to prepare summary is reasonable. Otherwise, I think we're going to lose track of time here very quickly.
Right. Do I hear any objection to Ben's point?
Good,
No.
twice a month, I think.
So we'll,
That's good.
so yeah, I think if we can do it, be it twice a month or every 2 weeks, however you want to work that out. And I thought I heard it's better in evenings as opposed to during the day. And I guess we're then somewhat subject to the days of the week that open up. We'll have to wait to hear from you. Okay.
Yes, that's exactly what it is. It's a pretty busy time right now. So yeah,
sure.
like I said, I mean, when the budget rolls out, finance meets pretty much every day.
Mhm.
And they're also talking about having more evening meetings this go around. So that's where my problem came in. I have to wait to see what evenings they're going to meet. And then that way I can fit you guys in between.
Good. Okay. Minor, did you have a point? Okay.
No,
Andy, every 2 weeks, I like, the twice a month actually sometimes stretches it. How about just see if we can get on something that's just steady every 2 weeks?
Yeah. I completely agree. Rob, you're with that? You're okay? Lawrence, you're okay?
Yeah, that's fine. I would also just remind everyone here that this is election year for the city of Annapolis. So between next month and November, we have our September deadline in there somewhere. So we need to be conscious of that fact as we go about doing research and trying to get speakers to come in and talk with us and things of that nature.
Ron, you're okay with that?
Yeah, I'm fine with that.
Okay. Ben? Okay. Do I hear a motion to adjourn, given the hour?
So moved, Mr. Chairman.
Second.
Adjourn.